Elizabeth, where and when were you born?
I was born June 11th, 1934 at the Dawson Memorial Hospital.
Where were your parents living at that time?
They were living on Pleasant Street at that time.
On Pleasant Street. Across what?
Across from the town hall in what eventually became Gladys Conrad's home, where we took piano lessons.
Okay. What other houses did you live in Bridgewater?
I lived on South King Street in a house which is now the parking lot for the Baptist Church, and I lived in on Queen Street at the corner of Victoria Road, I think.
No, Empire, isn't it?
No, the road that goes up to the karting mill. Yeah,
Yes.
that's Victoria Road. And then when my grandfathers both died in November, and it was easier to sell the smaller house than it was to sell the bigger house, so we moved into my grandfather Rafe's home, 143 Queen Street.
Okay. What do you remember about your early childhood in town?
I remember walking to school, and there were a lot of kids who lived in the south end of Bridgewater at that time. We all walked to school together, and when I think of the distance I walked when we were only 5 years old, it amazes me. And we felt very safe. My parents didn't worry that anything was going to happen to me walking to school. And I think we were very fortunate to grow up at that time.
What route did you follow?
All the way up King Street to Empire Street into the school.
Into the school.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So you knew the main street.
Knew
pretty
the
well.
main street, and my uncle's girlfriend was my kindergarten teacher, Chris Pimenter, and she used to say to Mom, "Allie, can you tell that girl to stop looking in the windows because she's always late for school?" And things didn't change when we moved to Queen Street, because I would wait till the bell rang and then I'd go to school then.
And you were right next door to the school.
And I lived right next door to the school.
What other things, what do you remember about, were you a brownie? Were you in any activities, young childhood?
As a young
activities?
child, yes, I was a brownie. And I went to Sunday school. And
where did you go to Sunday school?
I went to Sunday school in 2 Sunday schools. I went to Sunday school in the Presbyterian Church, and then my parents' friend, Genevieve Anderson, taught Sunday school in the Baptist Church, so I went to Sunday school with her too. And then when we moved to Queen Street, I went to Sunday school in the United Church, because my mother thought it was too far for me to walk by myself down to the Presbyterian Church, which is funny because I walked to school, but anyway.
You were walking in the opposite direction?
I was walking in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm. By that time.
Yeah. And then later on, when I became a guide, and I don't know what happened to the guide movement in Bridgewater, because the next thing I joined the CGIT movement, and I was in that in high school.
What do you remember about the guide cabin?
Oh, I remember the Halloween parties we had at the guide cabin, where we'd go down in the cellar and they'd have grapes as eyeballs and things like that. That was my memory.
The Chamber of Horrors.
The Chamber of Horrors. That was my memory of the guides. Yeah. And then later on, I remember coming back and helping to teach knots to the brownies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Was there a fireplace or was there a stove? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I remember the walls were wood,
yes,
but I don't remember whether there must have been a stove.
I think it must have been a stove.
Yeah.
I've often wondered. I don't think it was a fireplace.
I don't
think it was a stove. There was a stove removed from it. When
was there?
But I just wondered whether, when we were little, when we were young, whether there was a fireplace. But I think it
honestly
was a stove.
can't remember.
But
I remember sitting on the wooden floor when we do all those little ceremonies before we started.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the toadstool in the center.
What do you remember about school?
Oh, I loved school. We all played together. It didn't matter what grade you were in. You were all friends. And we'd play on the playground before school started and at recess. And when we were across the road in the elementary school, if it rained, we played in the basement, and had all.
Now, what do you call the elementary school?
Across the road.
The little school.
The little school.
The little school for you was the elementary
The
school.
elementary school. I started kindergarten
okay.
there. And then we moved over to the big school in high school. Junior high.
You moved over in junior high?
Yes.
See, when I thought I remembered going to the big school we were on the first floor of the big school for our elementary, and then we went over to junior high in the annex.
Oh, okay.
You know, and maybe they moved back and forth.
I think they did, because I remember kindergarten was in that school across the road.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, and all my elementary school classes were there. And I remember the kids that were bad would have to stay in the hall. Sit in the hall as punishment.
And the hall was really big.
It was huge, yeah.
It was a very big, the hall seemed very big.
And then in high school, I was involved in everything. We had a home economics group, and I was always on the yearbook committee in the newspaper, and badminton and dances. The home ec group would put on the food for all the dances and all the social events that went on. So I was always active in that, and that was fun too.
Now you must have been in the first graduating class from F.R. Davis.
I was.
So that was, when did the school actually open? Do you remember?
We didn't open until January.
That's right. Okay,
So we had the first half of the year in the old school, and then we moved over to the new school, which we thought was unbelievable.
Yeah.
We had beautiful labs and a wonderful auditorium, and it was just sparkling new.
It really was quite the change
from the old school.
Yeah, from the old school. Who do you remember as some of those teachers in that school right then? Do you remember?
Mr. Barter was our principal. We had Mr. Mauser for English, Mr. Tozer for science, Mr. Eady, and Mr. Faulkner taught history, and Miss Archibald was home economics. Mr. Hubley was manual training. And Miss Freeman was the secretary.
Okay. And Doug Eaton came to be the phys ed that first year.
We didn't have phys ed.
Okay.
For some reason or other. I guess it was because we went into the middle of the year, we didn't have phys ed.
Okay, so you didn't have phys ed.
No.
Because I remember that as being the big thing in that new gym, was to have phys ed. You know, to have an actual gymnasium.
We had somebody who came around from the Department of Education periodically and gave us exercises in the gym, but I think the phys ed teacher didn't come until the actual school year began in the fall. I don't think we had.
Well,
I know we didn't have phys ed.
Okay, maybe he came the following year.
Maybe.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
It could be that he came in the fall of that following year. He only stayed for 1 year.
Is that right?
Yeah, that was the thing.
Because I know
and I think maybe in that yearbook, which is 52-53, it's dedicated to him leaving, and that's probably what it is, that he didn't come until the fall.
Was that Doug Roach?
No, it was Doug Eaton.
Oh, okay.
He went to Memorial and taught phys ed.
Because Mr. Mauser was a basketball coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't play basketball because I was into music and other things that took up my time.
Well, when I look at the, as the editor of the Ink Spot, and the Ink Spot came out every second week.
Oh gosh, I can't remember.
Looks like it came out every second week. There was quite a bit to it.
There was a lot of work.
A school newspaper in those days. Well, who did the printing for you?
The secretary typed all those, whatever you call those things,
galleys,
and we had to crank them ourselves and put them together.
Crank the Gestetner machine.
The Gestetner machine. Yeah.
Yeah. What big events do you remember around high school?
Graduation, I suppose.
Where was graduation?
Graduation was in the new gym, and we all wore formal gowns, and the boys wore suits, and we marched up the long hallway and to the stage, and we had our presentation there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Did you have a dance on the same night?
Yes,
or-
we did.
Everything happened on
On the same
On night.
the same night.
And did you people decorate for the
We
dance?
decorated for the dance.
Okay, so it wasn't like grade 11 decorated for grade 12?
No,
or
we did
anything
our own
like that? You did your own
decorating, yeah.
decorating. You've been pretty active in keeping your class having a reunion. How often have you had reunions?
We started having reunions on our 40th year when we moved back to Nova Scotia.
Okay.
And somebody said, oh, we should get together. So we started at our home. We invited everybody that... I had a lot of addresses, and Eric Kubley had a lot of addresses. So between the two of us, we found everybody in our class.
Is that right?
And we sent out invitations, and we didn't hear back. And we thought, uh-oh, nobody's going to come. So we sent out a second invitation, and everybody came.
Is that right?
And we had so much fun that we've been having them every year. And we alternate. We go to, we'll say now, whose home will we go to next year? And we take
So you
turns.
pretty well decide
We decide a year in advance.
Year in advance where
It's
you're gonna
always
go
the
next.
same. And this year we had a 3-day celebration because it was our 60th and the Queen's Jubilee year.
Oh, that's right.
So it was quite exciting, and we got certificates from the Premier of Nova Scotia, and he sent us pins recognizing the Jubilee year of the Queen, and Nova Scotia pins, and we had the municipality of Lunenburg came and presented us with a certificate too, gave us municipality pins, and it was very special.
Very great. Good.
Yeah, it was
Didn't
wonderful.
make it into newspapers, did it?
Yeah, I wrote
Did
it
it?
up.
Oh, okay.
That as secretary of the class, I've always written all the right. And we went to theater in Chester, and then we went out for breakfast the next morning, and then we came to our place for
I see.
supper.
I see.
Yeah.
What about the exhibition? What can you tell me about
Oh,
the exhibition?
exhibition parades were, in those days the children were always in the parades, and the topic was always something, usually out of the funny papers, or one year we went as the beef eaters from London, and it was very exciting to march in that parade, and I think the whole parade has suffered from the lack of children in it.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
But as a little girl, did your mother make your costume, or did you make your costume?
I
Or do you
don't-
think I think the teachers?
I think probably
I think
the
in
teachers,
the
the little grades. I don't
because
think
I
we-
remember teachers
Yes.
talking about that they would have to make sunflower faces for
Yeah,
everybody. And things
I think
like
the
that.
teachers probably made them
And
for
then
the
as
lower
we got
grades.
older, then you kind of got into
Yes, to helping.
to helping to make your
I think
own,
so. Yeah,
make a
or
few
providing our own, one or the other.
What do you remember about the exhibition building, or about going to the exhibition?
Oh, I remember all the home economics displays and the jams and jellies, and then my father always had a booth in the exhibition, and I
did
would
he?
have to
Okay.
I would have to take my turns working there,
Mhm.
and remember all the concessions around there and the rides. Now my mother had a friend who knew Bill Lynch,
Mhm.
so he would give her tickets for me, so I hardly ever had to pay for a
Yeah.
ride. You probably got the same. Yeah.
Yeah, there always seemed to be a few, but I don't remember going on many. I know that we went for one day of rides. You know,
Yes.
we didn't sort of go every day.
No.
It was there was a day. But I remember walking up the hill and it being so hot
Oh,
sometimes,
it
even in
was.
September.
Mhm.
You know and it was sometimes it was just so hot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Walking up that hill, you wondered
Yeah.
if you'd make it.
That's right.
Mhm.
And yet we did.
We did.
But the other thing, what did you ever have things in the exhibition?
Oh, yes,
You know, like
we
the
always-
school stuff. The
Every
schools-
grade had to enter things.
Yeah.
We had them chosen. We had a competition in the classroom to see whose work was worthy of being in the
Yeah,
exhibition.
and then you went to see whether
Did
you
I
got
win a prize? Yeah.
And
Oh, I love going in the animals, seeing all the chickens and the
Yeah.
sheep and all the cows and everything. I loved
Yeah,
going in.
yeah.
Really enjoyed that aspect of the exhibition.
Tell me about the dancing classes.
Oh, with Mr. Bukta. Mr. Bukta came to Canada, and he came to Bridgewater to teach dancing, ballroom dancing. So we joined the dancing class, and I remember he couldn't speak very good English,
No.
and somebody always had to interpret his
And his wife came with him.
his wife came with, and his daughter used to
that's
come
right.
too.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
I remember he'd say 10, 11, 12. That's how he pronounced 11 and 12. And then at the end of the year, he encouraged us to go to Halifax to a competition. So how many of us went? 2, 4, 6 went.
Put the
Yeah.
names down.
Donald Sutherland, and this, when they do a program on Donald Sutherland on CBC, that picture is always in the program. So it's Donald Sutherland, Pat Miller, Doug Cook, Barbara Saunders, Robert Frank, and me. We didn't win any prizes, but it was quite exciting. We went to the Lord Nelson Hotel, no, the Nova Scotia Hotel, in the big ballroom there. We had to wear formal gowns, and it was very exciting.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And you came back to teach at the high school a couple of times after you graduated. Can you?
Well, I did. Jean, you were one of my pupils. I was either brave or crazy, one or the other. I came home from Mount A, and Mr. Bartow called me in desperation that the home ec teacher was sick. Could I finish the year for her? And I said, yes, I did. And I had never learned how to do registered, so I had to get a friend of mine to teach me how to do the registers, to tally up all the attendance and so on. I worked so hard, but it was a wonderful experience. And then the next year, another teacher had an operation, and he asked me to fill in that year. So I had 2 years of teaching home economics in Bridgewater. And he wanted me to stay, but I had already applied for my dietetic internship, so I declined the job and went on to my internship, which was good because then I had 2 careers to fall back on.
Mhm.
And when I went to Ontario, they wouldn't accept my Nova Scotia teacher's license, but I could work as a dietitian.
Mhm.
So it was a good move.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We got into the Sunday school before, but and you mentioned where you went to church. Do you have any other memories of church that you wanted to mention?
Oh, I always sang in the choir, and I remember one time Barbara Hebb and I were going to go skating after choir practice, so we wore our slacks to choir practice, and Mrs. Kellum scolded us. Girls, you do not wear slacks in church.
God forbid.
But today, that's it. Everybody wears slacks in
That's
church.
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
And I remember Sunday school. We had the little rooms at the back of the church where we had a Sunday school there.
All the little rooms,
The
the
little
little alcoves
yeah.
there. Yeah.
And Sunday school concerts. And I was always tall for my age, so it seems to me I always got to play the angel because I was tall.
Do you remember any Christmas concerts in the St. Andrew's Church Hall?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No.
Maybe I'm dreaming now.
I must have been too young to remember.
Well, maybe you had
we moved
to the other church, to
Maybe.
the Grace United, before I got to.
Mm-hmm.
to
Probably,
be
because all the concerts I remember were up in the United Church.
Okay. Now, one of your hobbies was playing the piano. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, I played the piano. I guess I was about 10 when I started. Took lessons from Gladys Conrad, and that was fun too because she had all kinds of piano duets and trios and triple trios, and we would get together and play in her home, and then we'd have recitals in June of every year. And I remember one year it was my year to give her flowers, and I gave her lilacs from our property, and she was allergic to lilacs, which I didn't know. That didn't go over very well.
of anybody allergic to
But the recitals were always a lot of fun, I thought, and it was the sharing the fun with all your girlfriends that took piano lessons too.
When did you learn to play the organ?
Oh, that's a long story. Well, when we moved back to Nova Scotia, there weren't any jobs for dietitians. I filled in a bit in the Diabetic Education Center, but then that job ended. So I thought, well, I've got to do something to keep my mind active. So I decided to take organ lessons from David Swicker. And 4 months after I started to take lessons, he said, I've got a job for you. I said, you've got to be kidding. No, he said, they're looking for an organist at Mount Olivet Lutheran Church. And he said, I told him that you could do it. So he taught, I'd never even been in a Lutheran church in my life, but he taught me the liturgy, and that led to a job at St. Luke's Lutheran Church when their organist retired. So now I continued taking lessons from David till I felt that I could handle it.
Is there a big difference between playing the piano and playing the organ?
Yes, there is a big difference in the coordination of your hands on the different keyboards, and then coordination of your feet. Mm-hmm. And now I also play for LaHave Manor when they have church services there, and Ryan Hall and Ridgewood. And this week I went to the Veterans Unit and helped out there. So
you're very busy with your music.
With my music.
Something that's
and I've always been in choirs all my life, and I'm in the Riverport Choir now. Mm-hmm. We've produced 3 CDs, and I was always in choirs in Ontario, and I was a church soloist in the church in Renfrew when we lived there.
Your father was a well-known businessman in town. What can you tell me about him?
Oh, he was very active in the community too, and probably that's why I'm so active, because I think he kept the golf course running pretty much by himself for years. He was secretary and president and manager, and then he curled, and he was active in the Businessmen's Association and helped with the Water Carnival, which they used to have every year. Mm-hmm. And he was active in the Drama Society. Mm-hmm. He had a band. He had a dance band, which had a contract for CBC until the war broke out, and then the men were all called up to duty. So
that was kind of the end of the band.
The end of the band.
I see.
But he always played the piano for everything.
I see.
We would gather around for sing-songs at the golf course, and he could play by ear or by music both. He was very talented.
I see. And he also sort of, what's the word for not organizing, promoted. Tell me about some of his promotions at the arena.
Oh yes, that was fun. We were talking about that the other day. I remember the wrestlers came and the little midgets came, and they sat on our Chesterfield, and their legs only came to the end of the seat of the Chesterfield. And then he had all the wrestlers from Bill Rhino. I remember him coming. Mm-hmm. And then he used to have singers come from the South. Anybody that was on a tour in the Maritimes, he would help promote them here at the arena in Bridgewater. And then, of course, they always came to our house for supper and to make them feel at home. Mm-hmm. And we also had, do you remember the... behind the Fairview Hotel, there was a building where all the travelers used to bring their goods. Yes. And a lot of the travelers would be there for 3 or 4 days, so we would have them to our home for meals to try to make them feel at home. The men's
that were all coming to the store.
Yeah. In those days, they came to show all their wares.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And when did his business close? Well, now tell me a little bit about the business, though.
Oh, the business was my grandfather worked for Mr. Hubley, who owned the business, and then when he retired, my grandfather bought it from him and changed it to A.L. Rafe's Limited. And then when he passed away, my father took the business over because his only brother was a bank manager and wasn't interested in the business, so my father took the business over. And I worked in there from the time I could kind of change, I suppose, after school and on the weekends. And even when I was at Mount A, he'd call me up and say, Elizabeth, I need you, come down here. And I hard work.
How did you get home from Mount A in those days? By bus?
Train. hmm And one year my suitcase ended up in Moncton, didn't end up in Sackville, and it had all my books in it for my January exams.
Oh,
that was
my
kind
goodness.
of tricky, yeah. Yeah, we always went by train.
You always went back by train, or came by train?
Yes.
Came
Yeah.
to and from by train. When you walk down the street, going back to having walked to school, what are some of the stores that you remember going from south to north?
There was a butcher shop down South King Street. Himmelman's, big store.
Yes.
There was a pastry shop, furniture store, drugstore on the corner, Heine's White Star Grocery, Ernst Jewelry Store. Mr. Goulden had a little bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another clothing store, the Bank of Montreal, Cecil White's clothing store, Mr. Lonus's grocery store, our store, Mr. Dolliver's wife had a store, Alvin Taylor drugstore, Stedman's, Miss Britton's hat shop. Yeah, Doug Holmes's, they sold
dry goods.
Mm-hmm. Bank of Commerce, Royal Bank. Then there was a grocery store where right next to where the bank, and then there was Ashkin's, and then the Lehman's shoe store, post office, Rofi's, Eisner's restaurant on the right hand side on the river.
Eisner's restaurant was a hangout for the.
Oh yeah, we used to go there
kids.
after school.
Yeah, that was
and
he
loved
that was
kids.
the teenage.
Yeah,
that was the teenage hangout.
And there was a tea room on the main street
yes,
too.
the Blue Rose Tea
Blue
Room.
Rose Tea Room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Gau's, and then Mr. Oxner had a little store up the street too. Simo's Bakery.
And Head Motors was across
Head
the
Motors
street.
across the street. And then Demon's Jewelry Store. And
Demon's moved from one end of town
they
to the other.
did. They did.
They were up there on the north side, and then they moved to the south end.
They
I think.
did.
You know, it wasn't the other way around.
No.
They came down
They
to
came
the
down.
south end.
And then
later
there was
on.
a tax shop up there too, wasn't there?
Yes, the tax shop. That's right. Yeah, the harness shop.
Harness shop. And talking about the main street, Saturday night you could barely walk up the street. Everybody came to town on Saturday night and shopped. Our store was so busy on Saturday nights, and my father had a suit club. You paid $1 a week to join the suit club, so that and then every once in a while he would draw for a free suit. And the people always came in on Saturday night to pay their $1 for that suit club, hoping they'd win a suit. And then he would send me up, excuse me, to get the mail on Saturday night, and you could barely get up the street. It was so busy to go and get the mail.
Yeah, and that was another thing. That brings up a good point. We all went to the post office.
We did.
That was a place that we all went. I mean, lots of times when I walked home from school, I walked home via the post office because it was my turn to pick up the mail.
And it came twice a day, didn't it?
Yeah, and you get the afternoon mail if you went at the right time.
Around 3:30, I think. And then
Can you remember your mailbox number?
498. Down on the bottom.
That's right. One of the big ones down on the bottom.
One on the bottom. One of the
I
big
think ours
ones.
was 414.
Yeah, because you would have a big one too. Yes. I remember learning to ride my bicycle, and the first time my mother said I was safe to ride downtown, but she would walk with me. So we went down what we called the Post Office Hill. We didn't know the names of the streets, but we knew they were like the Exhibition Hill and the Post Office Hill and so on. Yeah. So I was halfway down the street, and somebody went across in front of me, and I got nervous and jammed on my brakes, and then I started up again and went scooting across the road, and just missed a car and landed on the road and started to cry. And I said, "Oh, I think I've torn my nylons." Well, they weren't nylons. They were those awful cotton things we used to wear.
Lyle stockings.
Lyle stockings. And I didn't think about being hurt. All I thought about was my stockings being ripped. And Mom said, "There, I told you weren't ready to ride your bicycle down that hill."
We mentioned the golf club. Did you play golf?
I played golf, and I was the only girl. But since my father was so involved in the golf course, I didn't have any choice. Mm-hmm. Because we talked about this too. Years ago, you went everywhere with your parents. There was no such thing as leaving you home with a babysitter. You went with them. So I went to the golf course and I played. And I always played with my parents. And then when my boyfriend, who's now my husband, played golf, I played with him. Mm-hmm. And then I played golf right up until I played golf in Kitchener when we lived there, and played in Renfrew. But never had any girlfriends to play golf with.
Oh, is that right?
No, girls didn't play golf there.
No.
Our youngest
Later
daughter
on,
did.
just after you, Sharon Bickle and
Yes.
McPherson started, and
Started to
they're
play.
juniors, but they're the two girls playing with David Hubley and
Yes.
Barry Usher and some people
Yeah.
like that. There's a
But-
picture of them around somewhere.
Yeah, but girls just didn't play there.
What do you remember about the racetrack? Do you remember anything about the racetrack?
I remember the horses going around the racetrack, and that's about it. I never went to any of the races.
Okay.
No. But I remember Mr. Sweetie used to go to Prince Edward Island to race.
Mhm.
He was quite an accomplished.
Yeah, and he brought the racetrack. He brought the racers from the island over during exhibition week. I think
Yes,
it was.
that's true, he
That's
did.
when they came.
Mhm.
What do you remember about winter? Do you remember any winter carnivals or winter?
Yeah, I
skating?
remember skating in the winter carnivals, and we'd dress up to get prizes. I loved to skate, and we would go to skate 2 or 3 times a week after school. And
Do you remember skating in any other arena except the new one? Do you remember the?
I remember the exhibition one that it wasn't artificial,
No.
and so you didn't get to skate there very
Yeah.
much if the weather was mild. But we used to skate on the pond, the duck pond, and
The
we
dump
used to,
pond.
the dump, yeah, and then we'd skate on the cemetery pond too on Queen
Yes.
Street.
Yeah.
Skated outdoors a lot, and there was a little when I lived at the lower end of Queen Street, Cook's Hill had a little flat spot at the bottom of the hill where we'd skate too.
Oh,
in the
is that
wintertime.
right? Okay.
There are houses there now, but
Yeah.
they used to be quite, and we'd coast down that hill too.
Uh huh. Yeah.
End up on our front lawn.
And where else did you coast?
We'd sometimes go up to the golf course and coast, and then Maple Street they would close that in the wintertime, so we could coast down that hill.
Down the alley street.
Down the alley street.
hill.
hmm
Did you play tennis?
I didn't like tennis. I found it too hot.
Mhm.
I would rather swim. I love to swim. Mhm.
Where did you swim?
We used to down at we called it Weekles Point, then Miller's Point now,
Okay.
till they closed it,
Mhm.
and then we'd bicycle down the river to swim at cottages down there, and then we'd swim at Risser's Beach,
Mhm.
Green Bay, and when in junior high we'd bicycle out to Wiles Lake and swim out there.
Okay. We bicycled a lot.
We bicycled everywhere.
Yeah.
It was safe to bicycle, and we didn't worry about time in those days.
No.
Not at all.
Never
Never
worried.
thought of time. And our parents never worried about us when we were off bicycling either.
Barb
No.
Thompson from here mentioned to me about living in Amherst and being the same way, having the same, sort of
Mode of
just
transportation.
get up in the morning and be gone, and nobody worried about you.
No.
Because there was nothing to worry about.
No, we were safe. We were so lucky.
That's right.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about the water carnival. What do you remember? About
I
the water
remember
carnival?
all the competitions they used to have. Like the Sea Cadets would have a rowing competition, and there'd be swimming competitions. And I remember some of the divers diving off the bridge in a competition there, and they used to have the Queen of the Carnival, and we'd sit on the riverbanks and
Yeah.
watch the carnival, and they'd have fireworks. And my father was always involved in getting that organized too.
Was he involved in the Kinsman radio auction?
Probably.
Do you remember?
Oh, he was secretary of everything. He used to be secretary of the garden parties, and I remember so you didn't have night deposits then, and he'd bring the money home and put it under the bed. And if the dog would bark, we all would run around saying, "Oh, gee, somebody kind of break in the house." But I'm sure he was involved in the auction too. I can't remember too much about that, but
now, what about your mother? What was she involved in?
Mom was involved in a lot of things too. Her biggest involvement was with the Women's Institute, and she was always on calling the committees to bring little cookies and cakes for the luncheons, and she would campaign door to door for different organizations in town, and I would go with her. And then later on, when we left home, she could see a need for something for the teenagers to do, so she spoke to Ronnie Jefferson about forming a little group. And she said, "Oh, I'll volunteer to chaperone." So they formed a little youth group, and they'd play cards and have dances and so on. And for that, she won the Nova Scotia Volunteer Award.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
And
our home was always open to kids because I was an only child, and she just made my friends welcome.
And that was again the norm. Some houses could be open because
that's right.
Their parents were, or the mother was around. Like
mothers were always home.
My house was the same way. Mother was always home. There were other people whose mothers might have been working or whatever, but their homes weren't big enough or whatever.
Or whatever reason.
Yeah, yeah. What do you remember any shows on CKBW?
Barbara Saunders and I played on. They used to have talent shows Saturday afternoon, and Barbara and I played the piano in those quite often. And one time they said, "Now, girls, what are you going to play?" And Barbara got nervous and she said, "Piss Pot," and it was supposed to be Piff Pop. Well, I think they probably eliminated that from the air. Yeah.
I think they had that talent show that it was at 4:00 on Saturday.
And Smiling Ivan and
Smiling Ivan Dory came on afterwards.
Yes, it came on afterwards. Yeah. Oh yes. My father used to write his own advertising for his ads on the radio, and he and Jamie were very good friends, and so that was another spot that I was familiar with, the radio station, because he would take me up there all the time.
And where was the radio station at
it
that
was
time?
Above the Shamrock store on the corner there. Yeah,
down the south end of King Street.
Yeah. And then when I was in high school, I used to go down to the Bridgewater Bulletin office where they printed our high school yearbooks. I'd go down there and they'd run the galleys off, and I would proofread them down there.
I see.
So that was another.
So you knew where
I knew the ins and outs of the bulletin.
Which was next door to the theater at that time.
Yes, that's right. It was fascinating to see because everything, these big typesetters, and the men would be sitting in front of these big machines producing the newspaper.
It was quite a building.
Yes, it was, and noisy. I remember the smell of the ink and the noise of the machines.
Yeah.
And you knew that too.
I did it for a little while too, and I was sort of right as you went in the door in a little room right there across from, and everything just bang, bang, bang.
It was bang, bang, bang. I don't know how they could take the noise.
No.
I guess they get used to it.
No.